I'm sharing with you what is actually happening in my policy. Is it possible to have single manage? Why am I forced to have 38 different policies? Is it possible to have a policy where I can have the growth that I want in one policy? Little to no fees, allow for tax-free distributions. Can we do better than this? Well, the short answer to that question is yeah. My objective today is to reframe the conversation. I am not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. But I think as I walk through this, the answer is pretty clear because I think we all want the same objective. And the objective is we want to put ourselves in a position where we can have control over our dollar so that we can hit our WTF moment. So what we're talking about today is absolutely infinite banking, whole life compared to an IUL. And when I talk about a leveraged IUL, what specifically do I mean? What is this leveraged IUL that I am referencing? Well, again, this leverage IUL that I'm referencing is a secure compound interest account. And what I'm saying is a life insurance based product that is simply designed to produce supplemental income. Hard stop. It's a life insurance based product designed to produce supplemental income. So structure matters. What is that structure? We go over it all the time. That structure looks like this. It first starts with who you get the policy from. What company is providing this leveraged IUL? Not every life insurance company designs life insurance-based products to benefit you. So you would want a life insurance company that provides a product that meets the criteria necessary so that you can achieve the greatest return. The agent, who is structuring this for you? Does the agent understand how to build the right life insurance-based product? Whether it's a whole life IUL doesn't matter. Does the agent understand what he's doing? What questions do you ask that agent to determine whether or not they know what they're talking about? And then policy structure. It is all about policy structure. There's very little you can do with an IUL or a whole life policy if it's structured incorrectly. What does that math look like? And it's, again, pretty simple. In most cases, if we're looking at the growth potential of a whole life policy compared to just a basic IUL, compared to the SKIA that I reference, a leveraged IUL, what is the difference? Well, as it relates to growth, the beauty of having a whole life policy is this guarantee. Meaning if you're looking for guarantees, a whole life policy has one, guaranteed growth. And that growth is actually somewhere around, I'd say closer to, I think as of today, 4 to 5%. Is what I would say that growth is. But bottom line is somewhere around 4 to 5% is that guaranteed growth inside of a whole life policy, which is pretty good. Now, the growth inside of an IUL is not guaranteed, but this is where who you get it from matters, who builds it, and the type of life insurance IUL that you're actually using, because there are some great IULs out there that are doing some pretty spectacular performance. On average, that IUL growth is somewhere around 7%. It is not guaranteed. So again, whole life growth guaranteed. IUL, it's not guaranteed. And as it relates to a SKIA, a leveraged IUL, meaning you're using someone else's money, that 7% has the opportunity to generate and create an additional 3%. So again, just from a math perspective, if the objective is to build and generate compound interest, you want your money to make money and that money to make its own money. If we're just looking at the math, one gives me a guaranteed 4%. The other gives me an average of 7%. It's not guaranteed though. So I get it. If I had to choose guaranteed growth versus not guaranteed, I can see the tendency to lean towards the guaranteed. I get it. But when you look at the SKIA, how about 7% plus an additional 3? So 4% guaranteed versus an opportunity to make 10, which is better. And now the participating loan. This is the part where when people scream, become your own bank. Okay, let's talk it through. I'm going to place $1 into a life insurance-based product. My goal is to become my own bank. I'm getting a guaranteed growth inside of my whole life policy of 4 to 5%. Awesome. But now I need to function like a bank. What do banks do? They lend money. So now I need to access the dollars that I've accumulated inside my policy and lend it out. Whether it's for me or someone else, it is going out externally from the policy. What is the cost of using those dollars in my policy? That's the participating loan. Now, there are a few different ways to get to leverage money in a policy, but I'm focusing on the participating loan. That's the most efficient. In most cases, not all, in most cases, the growth inside of a whole life policy compared to the cost to use the dollar in the whole life policy, there's a negative spread, meaning it costs more to use my money than what I'm making. So if I've got a whole life policy making 4 to 5%, but it costs me negative 6% just to use my money to go do infinite banking. I'm not talking about what I'm invested in. I'm just saying to use my money. There's a negative spread created. Now, if my job is to sell you a product structured like this, then my position is pay less attention to what's happening inside the policy. It's what are you going to use these dollars for? Because if you use these dollars it costs you 6% to use them, and you use them externally and you make 15, there's still a positive spread there. So you're making a positive spread externally. I get it. Name the bank. Name one bank that would accept a negative spread to lend money. Name one. It doesn't exist. So how can you be a bank if you're taking a loss when you're lending money? Again, the math does not math. So is there a way, is there a strategy where we can create more of a positive spread between what grows in the policy and the cost to use it? That's where, if you structure an IUL correctly, it is possible to create a positive spread when you use your money. Again, that average growth inside of a regular IUL, again, regular IUL, no leverage, 7%. It costs somewhere around 4 to 5. And usually that 4 to 5% that it costs inside of an IUL, there's a ceiling. So you want to make sure you're getting the right product, because in some, that ceiling, well, in some, there could be no ceiling, meaning that participating loan can continue to increase. The life insurance policies we generate for this strategy has a ceiling of 6%, which means the maximum amount of the participating loan, the maximum interest rate or the cost that it would be for you to use your money inside your policy would be a maximum of 6%. As of today, it's somewhere between 4 and 5, which means inside your policy, there's a 2 to 3% spread. If we're talking about a leveraged IUL, that 2 to 3% spread is magnified. You've got your money making a 2 to 3% spread, and you've also got the dollar amount that you're leveraging, the borrowed dollar amount being used as a spread there as well. So it ends up doubling, which means you've got a 5 to 6% spread inside your policy when everything is functioning effectively. And again, just from a math perspective, which is better? So the question or the statement of you can't do infinite banking with an index universal life insurance policy might be true if the index universal life insurance policy is not structured correctly. But what if you structure it correctly? So it's not you can't do something. How about we ask a better question? How? What would need to happen? What are the variables that need to be in place so that I can do this strategy? Security. We talk a lot about security. The whole purpose to me for doing or using or having a life insurance-based product to generate and build wealth is because it's a vehicle that provides security. And so when we talk about security, the beauty around a whole life policy is it gives you a fixed interest rate, fixed growth. The dividend is guaranteed and it's fixed, which means as your policy grows, there is a consistent dollar amount that you're going to be able to make over time. That's awesome. If your money was just simply sitting in the stock market, you deal with plus and minus. You deal with, hey, sometimes the market is doing great, sometimes it's not. And what you hope for is that average of that plus and minus growth is moving in an upward direction. That's what you hope for. The reason we use an indexed universal life insurance policy is because we get to eliminate losses. So there's an opportunity to take advantage of the power and growth of the market without dealing with or having to participate in any of the losses. So what that means is, yes, when the market is doing great, we do great. And when the market crashes, we hold. And when the market takes off again, we do great. And when the market crashes, we hold. And when the market takes off, we do great. So with an index strategy, you have the ability to participate in the positive performance of the market and not participate in the negative. Again, which is better? Which one allows you to make more? Not the life insurance company, not the life insurance agent. Which one is better for you as it relates to generating and building wealth? Which one puts you in a better position? So again, it's not you can't do something. Let's reframe the question. What are the factors that need to be in place in order to make this happen? I get it. If you would ask me personally, I'm going to say, people ask me all the time, what's my take on whole life and IULs? To me, they're both mediocre. Like neither one of them are great. But if you structure an index universal life insurance policy properly, it can do some amazing things. But alone, it's still mediocre. It's not the IUL that makes it great. It's the fact that you can now add someone else's money inside the policy that allows more compounding faster. So it's the use of OPM. And that's me being an investor. It's the use of OPM is what makes this strategy better. And so let's just kind of dig into some of the differences. And again, this is that side-by-side piece, meaning if we were to just kind of talk through what are those pieces of the puzzle required to be able to be successful? And you can see the green compared to not green. But let's dig into what specifically. So IUL versus a whole life policy. Both allow for permanent life insurance. Both are permanent life insurance policies, meaning once you have it, you can't lose it. So both allow for that. So when someone is telling you the reason I don't like IULs is because you lose. One of the questions that I get often is how can I make sure I don't lose the life insurance I have? Both are permanent life insurance policies. How do you maintain a permanent life insurance policy? You keep it in force. How do you keep a life insurance policy in force? By keeping up with your contributions. So whether it's a whole life policy or an index universal life or variable life, it doesn't matter. They all function, permanent life insurance policies function the same. As long as you're maintaining the in-force ability of it, you have life insurance. Single policy management. This is huge. Most of you who understand or know someone who does infinite banking, how many policies do they have? Have you ever asked the question why? I was watching a video, and I guess I won't name drop today. I was watching a video, and they were talking about they were bragging about the number of whole life policies they have that they use to do infinite banking. And I want to say the number was 38. 38 policies to do infinite banking. Who truly benefits? Let's just look at the math. Who truly benefits when you have to open a policy every few years? Is it you? Because I get it. It's sold as, hey, this policy that you have, the reason you can't continue using this policy is because if you put any more money into this policy, you will hit your MEC limit. We do not want to hit our MEC limit. So to prevent that, we need to open a brand new policy. Who benefits when you open that brand new policy? Well, that agent that takes that commission benefits first. And so if you have 38 policies versus that growth that you're trying to achieve, is it possible to achieve that growth in the same policy? Is it possible? Again, it's not saying you can't do something. It's asking better questions. Is it possible to have single management? Why do I need to structure my whole life policy? And why am I forced to have 38 different policies? Is it possible to have a policy where I can have the growth that I want in one policy? Well, the short answer to that question is yeah. Inside of a leveraged IUL, you absolutely can have single policy management, but a whole life policy, you cannot. Single policy management. Obviously, in an IUL you can, in a whole life policy you cannot. Now, this next one, 50% or more liquid in the first year. And I know it shows both, and I can build a leveraged IUL that will give you at least 50% liquidity. But that's about the max that I've seen. So I'm actually going to reverse this. Let's make it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to say that is actually, if you're looking for max liquidity in the first year, I would say that a whole life policy does this better. But let's also understand the product we are purchasing. Why did you get this infinite banking strategy? Did you get it for only the first year? I don't think you did. I think you got this savings vehicle, this savings strategy, so that you can have leverage over time to be able to invest in what you want, build wealth, at some point take income. I'm sure there are many other factors other than how much can I access in year one. So I would say this is a spot where a whole life policy does better. But you have to peel the layers back. What is the impact of you having 50% more or more, 90% liquidity in year one inside of your whole life policy? Peel the layers back and ask the questions, what's the impact on the full growth of my policy over time as a result? Because when you peel those layers back, what you learn is you've got a policy that will never break even. You've got a policy that if it does break even, it won't break even until year 12 or 15. And we'll get into what that break even point means. But my point is, if we're just talking about first year liquidity, one does better than another, and the whole life policy can absolutely do better than a leveraged IUL. Expenses. This is one, I review a lot of policies. And because there's a lot of people out here who have these Lafayette Life, Mass Mutual, whole life policies that they are very proud of. And when they ask me questions about fees, because the story is whole life policies have little to no fees. That's the story. And IULs are riddled in fees. The likelihood of your IUL imploding is very high. And I'm actually going to say that that can be true. Can be true. But that's where it goes back to, what company did you get it from? What agent built it? What is the structure of this policy? So when we're talking about a properly structured index universal life insurance policy that's designed with leverage, it's not even close. And I would challenge you, if you have a whole life policy, turn to the fees page. Grab your whole life policy, take a look at what it is you're contributing, and then go to the page where it shows you the breakdown of your fees. It doesn't exist. And we're not asking the right questions. The question we should be asking is, why? Why, when I go to my whole life policy and I go to whatever the page is that shows the illustrated breakdown of what I'm contributing, that's there. Why isn't there a breakdown of what is it costing me to have this policy? Because when you look at the breakdown of the fees inside, you should be able to know where every dollar is gone. But the bottom line is, when we talk about expenses, it is not even close. The fee structure inside of a properly structured IUL is designed for you. And because it's designed for you, it has to be designed with a decreasing fee structure. Hard fact. Whereas with most, and I'm going to say, when I say most, if we're talking about 10 policies, I'm going to say 9 out of those 10, poorly designed. Guaranteed security features. This is a permanent life insurance policy through a mutual life insurance company. So the guaranteed security features are the same for both. Whether we're talking about a whole life policy or an IUL, doesn't matter. The ability to add leverage to the policy. The ability to take someone else's money, add it back into the policy as brand new premium. Is that acceptable in a whole life policy compared to a properly designed leveraged IUL? Again, it's just factual. You can apply this. You can apply leverage to you can apply leverage back as brand new premium inside of a properly structured IUL, but you cannot do that in the whole life policy. And again, if this is going to be an apples to apples discussion, it's asking the right question. Why? Why can't I? And if I cannot apply leverage into a whole life policy, why? And what does the structure need to look like so that I can? Because can we agree, especially my real estate investors out there, can we agree the usage of other people's money allows you to make more? So if we know this, and if this strategy is designed so that I can do external investments, why wouldn't I be able to apply OPM inside of my policy? Why? And I think if enough of us are asking this question, we can actually address this issue with this strategy. 10% plus growth potential. And I'm talking 10% plus growth potential inside the policy. We've already gone through that. I showed you the visual. You can get that guaranteed 4 to 5% inside of your whole life policy. And I can prove to you, I can show you where you can achieve on average 7% on the IUL and then another 2 to 3% on the leverage dollar amount you're using. We can get to that, I'll call it 8 to 12% growth potential inside of a leveraged IUL. 10% distribution potential. Why did you get this policy? Most people who do infinite banking are not planning to infinitely bank for the rest of their life. One of the other factors around infinite banking is the ability to at some point receive income. So while I'm using the money in the policy to do external investments, I'm using them to buy more assets. Those assets are going to at some point produce me a return that I can also use as income when it's time. So the goal of the infinite banking strategy is to also produce income. Where in your infinite banking strategy using your whole life policy are you able to take distributions? What, and again, this is where asking better questions. What is required of the structure that you have? What's required of that structure so that you can produce income? Like what needs to happen? Well, can we agree that if you're making 4 to 5% inside your policy and it costs you 6 to 8% to use the money, it's very difficult to live off something that's creating negative spread inside the policy. So at a minimum, we need to be generating a positive spread in the policy so that when I go to leverage the dollar amount for supplemental income, I am not causing my policy to implode. And that's where a leveraged IUL shines. If I'm making 10 to 13% in the policy, and it's costing me 4 to 5% to use the money in the policy, there's a positive spread every time I'm using a dollar inside my policy, so the ability for my policy to implode is less. Tax-free distributions. This is a properly structured cash value life insurance policy. They all allow for tax-free distributions. The growth is actually growing tax deferred. And as long as you are borrowing the dollar amount out to use, it is a tax-free distribution. And they both allow for that. And then tax-free death benefit. Again, these are both properly structured cash value life insurance policies. So they both allow for tax-free death benefit. So if we're just comparing colors, which is better? And again, if I'm over here, it's not I can't do something. It's why can't I do something? Why do I need multiple policies? Why are the expenses the way that they are? Why can I not add leverage to my policy? Let's ask better questions so that we can get to better solutions. And then the last one is, can I do infinite banking, whether it's a leveraged IUL or a whole life policy? And the answer is, we can do it in both. But notice, structure matters. But the question isn't, should you or could you? It's, can you? Can you do infinite banking in both? And the answer is yes. You just have to make sure it's structured correctly. But now, what I want to do is kind of dig into some of the specifics. So let's look at a properly structured whole life policy designed for infinite banking. And let's understand some of the differences between the exact same, I'll call it process in a leveraged IUL. And when I'm looking at whole life policies, the first place that I focus is, one, what is that break-even point? Meaning if I'm putting in a certain dollar amount, and this one is for a 38-year-old standard non-tobacco, 38-year-olds putting in $49.06 a month, $49.06 a year, and that's the dollar amount being contributed. And the question is, at what point, what is that cash value? What is that total cash value at the end of year one? So my first question traditionally is, where do I break even? Meaning if I'm putting in 4906, at what point does that 4906 equal what it is I'm contributing? At what point? And the reason I want to know that first is because that tells me if I can the earlier I can break even, the earlier I can start building compound interest. Meaning it is difficult for my money to make money if the vehicle that I'm putting my money in is losing money. Does that make sense? The goal is if I put in $1, I want access to that dollar. But if I put in $1 and I only have access to 50 cents, then at what point can I ever expect to be able to take income? It would have made more sense for me to just keep the money that I was, keep the money out of that product and eventually turn that into income.
Right. And that's the number one thing that people ask is, when can I leverage my money for infinite banking?
Well, not just infinite banking, but income in general. Meaning, if I put in $1 and I have 50 cents available, I can leverage that 50 cents to do infinite banking. That's not a problem. So the ability to leverage your cash value, yes, it's there. But for me, it's what about the income? The reason I want to know where I break even, because if I don't break even for 5 years, then that means it's going to take me another 5 years for my money to double. So where I break even matters. So at what point in this policy, if I'm putting in 4906 throughout this period of time, at what point do I break even? And I think I already put it here. Yeah. What this is saying is it's going to take, and here I'll highlight it. It's going to take, I want to say it's right here. It takes 8 years inside this policy. So that's 4906. I guess I can zoom in. It takes 8 years inside this policy before I even break even. So that first 8 years equates to about $39,187. So if I come over here and look at that same period of time, it's right here. So at this point, at the 8-year mark is where you break even. Oh, there you go. At this point, at the 8-year mark is where you break even inside this policy. So what that means is, in order for my money to start making money over and above what I've contributed, it's going to start somewhere around that 8-year mark. And again, this is a bare bones whole life policy, nothing special. I'm simply putting in 4906 a month. I keep saying 4906 a month. 4906 a year. Well, what would that look like inside of a properly designed index universal life insurance policy? And this is a properly designed index universal life insurance policy without leverage. Where do we break even? And I've kind of already highlighted it here. It's at year 5. So again, this gentleman, yeah, it's standard plus non-tobacco. The break-even point in this policy is year 5. So 4906 times 5 equates to 24,530. At year 5, we would have an accumulation value about 24,889. So I'm about $300 more in cash value than what I've contributed. So that break-even point, again, the importance of that break-even point tells me this is where I can start generating income. But let's go a step further. Just because I break even, how much accessibility, how much of my money is actually working for me when I open this policy? So coming back over to this whole life policy, I put in 4906 in year 1, 4906 in year 1. How much do I actually have available in cash value? How much is actually working for me in this policy? 3771. So I put in 4906, I've got 3771 working for me. So let's do some math. Good times. 4906 minus 3771 gives me, what is that? 1. So that means I lost $1,135 just in year 1. I put in 4906, I've got 3771 working for me. I lost $1,135 in year 1. Again, this is where I should be able to turn to the page in my whole life policy that explains the difference between what I put in and what I have available. Go find it. But what does that look like inside of, again, a properly structured IUL? And just so that I can zoom in a little bit better. Oh, hold on. Let me do this real quick.
Okay. Just take your time.
Yeah, we'll get there.
By the way, we have some really great questions that have loaded up in the chat. So that's, if you have any, this would be a good time to jump in there. Some people say, I don't know where the chat is. If you hit the comments on your mobile device or on the computer as well, I think that's where they are, then you'll see the comments. The live chat should pull up. But if you're watching the replay, this doesn't apply to you. Okay.
So what I was getting at was, okay, so inside of a properly structured IUL, putting in the same 4906, come on, same 4906, and my accumulation value, meaning how much money is actually working for me, is 4396. So again, if I'm putting in 4906 and I have 4396 working for me, that's a difference of $510. So again, my point was this. I put in 4906 in both of these policies. There's going to be fees associated with it. There's no way around that. I should at least be able to turn to the fees page and understand what is that breakdown? What are those fees I'm being charged? Because I'm okay with that as long as I can outperform, outproduce, outpace those fees. And again, the break-even point. One breaks even in 8 years, one breaks even in 5 years. I'm going to say they're similar. One is absolutely better than the other, but I'm still going to call it similar. Is there a way we can beat that? Is there a way that we can improve that? Again, asking better questions. Is there a way I can break even faster inside of my whole life policy? Is there a way I can break even faster inside of my leveraged IUL? Well, the answer to that question is yes. But before we get there, let's break down these fees. So one is 1135. The other is 510. Again, what is this breakdown of these fees inside of this whole life policy? Well, I'm sorry, I can't find it because there's not a page that breaks down what those fees are. But inside of a properly designed IUL, there absolutely is a fees page, and this is it. There are 3 buckets of fees associated with all, not some, all life insurance policies. And those 3 buckets of fees is there's a premium charge, there's an expense charge, there's a cost of insurance. And if you add these 3 numbers up, again, without me doing it, if you add these 3 numbers up, it's more than the 510 that we're showing. But it's because that 4906 is going to make a certain dollar amount. And then the fees, the premium charge, the expense charge, the cost of insurance are going to come out of that. So the difference between what I put in, the 4906, and the 4396 that I have in accumulation value, the difference between those 2 numbers, I have the reason. I know why. And as I mentioned, the fee structure should be in a decreasing fashion. Notice the expense charge is where that opportunity is located. It starts out at $274 a year, then it drops down to $103 a year, down to $60 a year forever. It's this decreasing structure that allows your policy to build compound interest faster. Why? When do I need the money the most? I need the money in the latter years, so I need my policy to be generating the least amount of fees at that point. There are certain things that we cannot do anything about. We can't do much about the premium charge. As I can add a premium into this policy, there's a premium charge. Not much you can do about that. The expense charge is where the cost of underwriting, the cost of me, that's where the life insurance person's commission is located in this expense charge. The key is it needs to be designed such that it's a decreasing structure. The cost of insurance, this is another one we can't do much about. As we get older, it costs more to insure us. But because of that decreasing fee structure as it relates to the expense charge, I can at least outperform the fees with the growth in the policy. meaning that 7 to 10% that I'm making inside the policy outperforms whatever this fee structure is. So it ends up not even mattering. But the key piece is it's designed correctly. So, but let's continue this a little bit further. As we break down how a policy like this performs in comparing a whole life policy to an index universal life insurance policy, and again, a leveraged IUL. If we were to just look at the first 7 years, whether we're talking about a whole life policy or an IUL, not even paying any attention to growth. I'm not concerned about any growth. If we just look at the last, I'll call it, or the first 7 years inside of this strategy. First 7 years inside of this strategy, let me get rid of that. Let me go back to that. Again, putting in 4906, whether we're talking about a whole life or an IUL, can we agree? It's the same dollar amount. It's nothing different. Whether we're talking an IUL or a whole life policy, it's the same amount. I'm not even talking about the growth, not talking about the guaranteed 4%, not talking about the average 7% growth that you may get. I'm not adding growth in this equation at all. I'm just strictly talking about the money that is working for you. It's the same dollar amount, whether we're talking about an IUL or a whole life policy. But when you add the leverage, and this is kind of what I was referencing earlier, when you add the leverage, and I'll zoom in for you, in year one, you've put in 4906. In year two, you've put in 4906. But in year three, something special happens. That leverage kicks in year three. And in year four, it's the same leverage being added. And in year five, that leverage doubles. Year five and year six. Then in year seven and year eight, that leverage triples. Again, just from a math perspective, which is better? If you've got 4906 working for you in both of these policies compared to, I think it's somewhere around $78,000 in total working for you here compared to 34,000. Yeah, I guess you can see it. I can help you see it. There's, still not there. It's in the 7-year mark. 4906 times 7 is about $34,342. But when you add the leverage, this combined dollar amount is in total $78,500. And again, this is no growth. This is just what's working for you. So which is better? 34,000 working for you or 78,000 working for you? And again, I'm not telling you what you should do. I'm sharing with you what we actually do. And if we're just focused on, I want a strategy that can build and generate wealth for me. I want a strategy where my money can work securely for me. And because I am a bank, I want to be able to use other people's money like a bank uses other people's money. So I want a strategy that will allow me to add other people's money in it. And when I add that other people's money, guess what happens? That 34,000 that I'm contributing has an additional 34,000 or so that's working for me. So in total, I have double the amount working for me inside my policy than you would just having a basic whole life or even a basic IUL. Again, which one is better? Which one allows you to hit your goals faster? And I don't know that I mentioned this, but I think a part of that question that we just had up, sweetheart, was around guaranteed. Right. This is a big question that I get often. Whole life policies, I have guaranteed growth of somewhere around 4 to 5%. You're right. The growth on either one, whether it's an index universal life insurance policy or a leveraged IUL, either one, the growth is not guaranteed. You're right. But what does the data say? So, and what is so awesome about the timing of this question is the question that I wanted to address here was, this came out of that video that I had referenced earlier. A client of mine was asking, or one of the comments on our video was stating, there is no way you can get a guaranteed 13% out of a strategy like this. And my response to him was this: you're right. Nowhere have I said you can get a guaranteed 13%, but I did say you can get 13%. It's not guaranteed, but what does the data say over time? And let's just use my personal situation. I've had my policy since 2020. So let's look at the performance of an IUL over the last 24 years. And again, I know this is a busy chart. I will zoom in, but I just wanted to give you the breadth of it. What we're looking at is the performance of the S&P 500 inside of an index universal life insurance policy with leverage over time. And this is from 1997 through 2025. And so if we just simply drill in to the starting in 2020. So in 2020, this first column is the S&P 500 return. So this first column, I guess I'll do it this way. The first column is the S&P 500 crediting return. So if you have an IUL and that IUL is tied to the S&P 500, and if you've been on this channel, you know that any strategy, any leveraged IUL that I build, they're all built the same way. The only crediting strategy we use is the S&P 500. Why? Because I have the data over time. I get it. There may be some other indices that may be functioning or performing better to date. Well, in today's market, it's not. But the bottom line is the reason we use the S&P 500 because it's tried and true. I have the data over time that proves how it does or doesn't function. And then the match. So we've got the crediting return that happens inside the IUL. When we use the leverage is making the same crediting dollar amount, but there is a cost to borrowing the money. There's a cost to adding leverage in the policy. To better understand what that strategy looks like, I want to just highlight this again. What's happening inside of a leveraged IUL is your contribution is going into the general fund along with a leveraged dollar amount. Both of those dollar amounts are protected by the 0% floor. And then there's a portion of that dollar amount that's taken and used to buy a call option. So when I talk about the crediting strategy, it's the crediting of that call option between these two dollar amounts, my contributions and the contributions being made by the life insurance company. So this first column is the crediting going into, or as it relates to my contribution. The second is the crediting as it relates to the leveraged dollar amount, but that leveraged dollar amount came at a cost. And that cost prior to 2022 was 4%. But as of today, it's 5%.
You want me to go full vibe board?
I don't know that it matters because this is just it's a weird chart. And I think the font on it is so small, it just kind of is what it is at this point. So, but I'll make it as large as I can. So if we're just looking at 2020, in 2020, what was the crediting of the S&P 500 in my policy? It was 10%. And the leveraged dollar amount, the borrowed dollar amount in my policy, what was that crediting? 10%. But it cost me 4% to borrow this 10. So again, as long as there's a positive spread made, I keep the difference. So 10% minus 4% is 6%. So what did I make in total in 2020? It's just math. How about 16%? 2021, same thing. 10% made, 10% leveraged, it cost me 4. What did I make? 16%. This is not guaranteed, but this is actually what I made inside my policy. Anyone know what happened in 2022? The market crashed. When the market crashed, what happened in my policy? Well, this is an index universal life insurance policy. I benefit from the growth of the market, but when the market crashes, I hold. I don't benefit from any negative performance. Negative performance in the market does not negatively impact my performance in my policy. I hold where I am. There's a contractual guarantee that says I cannot lose any money I've put into this policy. There's no guarantee on the growth. There's guarantee on the fact that I can't lose. So these prior 2 years, where I made 16%, just because the market crashed in 2022, this combined 16% in year 20 and 21 that I made, I get to keep. Just because the market crashed, I didn't lose anything that I made in the prior years. But what happened in 2022? I made nothing. So I got a fat 0% in 2022. And the leverage dollar amount I used inside my policy made nothing. But let's be clear. The life insurance company does not care that I did not make any money that year. I borrowed a certain dollar amount from the life insurance company, and that cost on that borrowed dollar amount is 4%. So in essence, I made negative 4% in my policy in total. So 16 in 2020, 16 in 2021. The statement made was there's no way you can make 13%. Yes, there is, but it is not guaranteed. Some years I will, some years I won't. And then go to 2023, what happened? The market recovered. And when the market recovered, I made my 16. And in 2024, I made another 16. We're now sitting in 2025. Anyone know where we're headed in 2025? But that's not even the point. The point is, what is the actual performance? It's not guaranteed. But if the IUL is structured correctly, I have the ability to outperform that 4 to 6% that you are guaranteed inside of your whole life policy. It goes back to structure. If it's structured right, you can achieve your goals. If it's structured right, you can put your money in a position to outperform. And even if 2025 ends up being a zero performing year and I lose 5%, if we were to just simply average.
Well, wouldn't 2023 and 2024 be 15 since the.
Oh, my bad. You are 100. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
They'll come for us if we don't fix it.
Thank you for that. Let me restate what she stated. The cost of borrowing the dollar amount in 2020, 2021, and 2022 for me, 2020, 2021, and 2022 for me was 4%. I think someone had asked, had the ceiling changed in my policy? The ceiling and the floor had not changed, but the cost to borrow, because what happened during this period? This is when inflation skyrocketed. This is when interest rates changed. And so the cost to borrow shifted from 4% to 5% in 2023. So it cost me a percentage more than it cost me the prior year. So you're absolutely correct. So if I made 10% on my money and I made 10% on the leveraged money, but the cost of that leveraged money was 5% now, I did not make 16%. Thank you, sweetheart. I made 15%. You're spot on. And so in 2024, I did the same, 15%. But it goes back to the statement that was made. There is no way you can make 13% inside of a strategy like this. Show it to me. I'm showing it to you. It's not guaranteed though. And if you were to just simply average the 16 plus the 15 minus the 4 and minus a potential 5 for 2025, we don't know how 2025 is going to end. But even if it was a negative performance for 2025, what is the average of just that period of time in my policy? That averages out to somewhere around, again, you guys can do the math, but if I remember correctly, it averages around somewhere around 8.3, 8.4%. So I am still outperforming the average over time inside of a strategy like this. And I am just about doubling what you can do inside of a whole life policy. So I'm not telling you what to do. I'm sharing with you what is actually happening in my policy. So instead of saying you can't do something, let's ask a better question around what is required of your current policy to be able to achieve performance like this? Or how about this? Can we do better than this? Like, is there a way to structure things so that we could absolutely do better? This is where the argument might come, well, you're using the S&P 500 for this strategy. There are other indices that can be used, like the B of A has an index fund. There's other index funds that can be used. What if we use something other than the S&P 500 for this strategy? I think that's a valuable argument. But here's the difference. I have the data over time that shows how the S&P 500 functions. And the S&P 500, I'd say since over the last 35 years is somewhere around 7.2% average. I'll take that. I'll take slow, steady, secure growth all day long.